The music stopped. A glass shattered somewhere in the crowd, and every eye in the garden turned to Captain Ethan Caldwell, frozen in his crisp army dress blues. As a drunk guest slurred words cut through the warm Georgia air. "What's a fairy like you doing in that uniform?" Ethan's jaw tightened, his chest heaving beneath the weight of his medals. He'd faced gunfire in Afghanistan, but nothing burned like the laughter rippling through the wedding guests' friends. Family, strangers, all staring. He was 28, a soldier forged in discipline. Yet here, at his cousin's wedding in a small-town orchard, he felt like a boy again, cornered by shame. The day had started with promise. Ethan had driven 6 hours from Fort Benning, his uniform pressed to perfection, his heart light with the chance to see family after 2 years overseas. He'd imagined dancing, laughing, maybe even stealing a moment to breathe without the weight of his secret. Being gay in the Army was no longer a dischargeable offense. But in this rural corner of Georgia, where church steeples outnumbered stoplights, it was a truth he guarded like classified intel. The wedding was held in a sprawling peach orchard, fairy lights strung between trees, tables draped in white linen. Ethan's cousin, Lila, glowed in her dress, and her groom, Ryan Harper, a local firefighter, had welcomed Ethan with a grin that felt like home. Ryan, 29, was the kind of man who filled a room broad-shouldered, with a laugh that carried and eyes that seemed to see straight through you. They'd known each other since high school, back when Ethan was the quiet kid with big dreams and Ryan was the football star who never let anyone feel small. But now, as the drunk guestsome uncle of Lila stumbled forward, pointing at Ethan, the air grew thick with tension. "I saw you dancing with that guy earlier." The man spat, his voice loud enough to halt the band. "You think you're fooling anyone." Ethan's hands curled into fists at his sides. He wanted to disappear, to melt into the orchard shadows. The crowd's whispers grew louder, a mix of shock and amusement, and he felt the weight of every stare. Lila, horrified, rushed toward the uncle, but Ethan's eyes locked on Ryan, standing near the altar, his face unreadable. This wasn't supposed to happen. Ethan had come to celebrate love, not to be its scapegoat. He'd spent years building a life where courage defined him through basic training, through deployments, through nights when he wondered if he'd ever feel safe enough to be himself. Yet here, in this moment, courage felt like a lie. "Ethan," a voice called, soft but firm. Ryan stepped forward, his tuxedo jacket slightly askew, his expression a storm of resolve and something deeper, something Ethan couldn't name. The groom's presence silenced the crowd, and for a moment, Ethan's heart dared to hope. Ryan raised a hand, not to quiet the drunk, but to command the moment. "Enough," he said, his voice steady, cutting through the murmurs like a blade. He turned to Ethan, and in his eyes was a fire Ethan hadn't seen since they were teenagers. Stealing glances across a locker room, pretending it meant nothing. "I need to say something," Ryan began, his voice trembling just enough to betray his nerves. He looked at Lila, then back at Ethan, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Ethan's earliest memory of Ryan was at 15, on a sweltering summer day by the Chattahoochee River. They'd skipped stones, laughed, and shared dreams under the shade of a willow. Ryan had talked about becoming a firefighter, saving lives, while Ethan confessed his plan to join the Army, to prove he was more than the shy kid everyone underestimated. There was a moment, fleeting but electric, when their hands brushed, and Ethan felt a spark he buried deep. They'd stayed friends through high school, but life pulled them apart. Ethan to West Point, Ryan to the Fire Academy. They'd reconnected at family gatherings, always circling each other with an ease that felt dangerous. Ethan had never acted on it, never dared. Ryan was straight, engaged to Lila, living the life everyone expected. Or so Ethan thought. Now, standing in the orchard, Ryan's words hung in the air, unfinished. Ethan's pulse raced. He wanted to run, to escape the humiliation. But Ryan's gaze held him in place. The groom took a step closer, and the crowd leaned in, sensing something bigger than a drunken outburst. Ethan's a hero, Ryan said, his voice louder now, carrying the weight of truth. He served our country, risked his life, and he's standing here taking this crap because of who he loves. That's not weakness. That's strength. The words hit Ethan like a shockwave. He blinked, his throat tight, as Ryan's eyes never left his. There was something raw in them, something that made Ethan's chest ache with a longing he'd suppressed for years. Lila stepped forward, her face pale but resolute. "Ryan," she said softly, her voice a mix of love and fear. She touched his arm, and Ethan saw the flicker of pain in her eyes. This wasn't just about defending him. Something was unraveling, and Ethan wasn't sure he was ready for it. The drunk uncle muttered something, but Ryan ignored him, turning to the crowd. "I'm done hiding," he said, his voice breaking. "I've been hiding for years, and it's killing me." Ethan's breath caught. Hiding. Ryan, the man who seemed to have it all: love, family, a future. The orchard felt smaller, the air heavier, as Ryan's next words loomed like a storm on the horizon. "I'm not who you think I am," Ryan said, his eyes locking on Ethan's. "And I've loved him since we were kids." The world tilted. Gasps rippled through the crowd, and Ethan felt his knees weaken. Ryan had just confessed to loving him, in front of everyone, at his own wedding. The rest of the night blurred. Lila's mother ushered the drunk uncle away, and guests whispered in clusters, their faces a mix of shock, confusion, and curiosity. Ethan stood rooted, his mind reeling. Ryan's confession was a grenade, and the shrapnel was still flying. Lila pulled Ryan aside, her voice low but fierce. Ethan couldn't hear their words, but he saw the tears in her eyes, the way her hands shook as she gripped Ryan's. Ethan wanted to go to her, to apologize, to fix this, but his feet wouldn't move. He'd loved Ryan too, in secret, for years, but he'd never imagined this. Never imagined Ryan felt the same, or that he'd choose this moment to shatter his own life. As the band started playing again, a feeble attempt to restore normalcy, Ethan slipped away from the crowd, finding refuge behind a row of peach trees. The night air was cool, the stars sharp above, and he pressed his back against a trunk, trying to steady his breathing. Footsteps crunched behind him. "Ethan," Ryan said, his voice soft, almost broken. Ethan turned, his heart pounding. Ryan stood there, tie loosened, eyes red-rimmed but steady. "I'm sorry," Ryan said. "I didn't plan this. I couldn't let them hurt you." "You didn't have to do that," Ethan whispered, his voice raw. "You're getting married, Ryan, to Lila." Ryan shook his head, stepping closer. "I love Lila. I do. But not the way I love you. I've tried to be someone I'm not, and I can't anymore." Ethan's chest tightened, torn between hope and guilt. "What about her? What about your life?" "I don't know," Ryan admitted, his voice cracking. "But I know I can't keep lying. Not to her. Not to you. Not to myself." They stood there, inches apart, the weight of a decade's worth of unspoken love hanging between them. Ethan wanted to reach out, to pull Ryan close, but the chaos of the moment held him back. "We need to talk," Ethan said finally. "But not here. Not like this." Ryan nodded, his eyes never leaving Ethan's. Tomorrow. Please. As Ryan walked back to the reception, Ethan stayed in the shadows, his heart a battlefield of hope and fear. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But one thing was clear, nothing would ever be the same. The morning after the wedding, Ethan woke to the hum of cicadas outside his motel room window. His uniform hung on the closet door, a silent reminder of last night's chaos. He hadn't slept, his mind replaying Ryan's confession on a loop. I've loved him since we were kids. He sat on the edge of the bed, elbows on his knees, staring at the worn carpet. The words were a gift and a curse, unlocking a longing he'd buried under years of discipline and denial. But they also carried a cost: Lila's pain, Ryan's unraveling life, and the gossip that would surely spread through this small Georgia town like wildfire. Ethan's phone buzzed. A text from Ryan. Meet me at the river. 10 a.m. The Chattahoochee, their old haunt. Ethan's stomach twisted, but he grabbed his keys and headed out, the weight of the unknown pressing on his chest. The riverbank was quiet, the water glinting under the morning sun. Ryan was already there, sitting on a flat rock, his tuxedo replaced by jeans and a faded fire department t-shirt. He looked younger, vulnerable, like the boy Ethan had known at 15. You came, Ryan said, standing as Ethan approached. His voice was soft, but his eyes were intense, searching Ethan's face for something: forgiveness, maybe, or a sign to keep going. I didn't have a choice, Ethan said, his tone sharper than he intended. You dropped a bomb last night, Ryan, in front of everyone. What were you thinking? Ryan ran a hand through his hair, exhaling. I wasn't thinking. I saw that guy humiliating you, and I just snapped. I couldn't let it happen. Not to you. Ethan's throat tightened. He wanted to be angry, to blame Ryan for turning a private truth into a public spectacle. But the sincerity in Ryan's voice disarmed him. You could have warned me, Ethan said. Or Lila. God. Ryan. What about her? Ryan's face fell, and he looked out at the river, his jaw tight. I talked to her last night, after you left. She's hurt, confused, but she knew something was off with me. She's always known. Ethan took a step closer, the gravel crunching under his boots. Known what? That year he stopped, the word gay catching in his throat. It felt too big, too final. Even now, that I'm in love with you, Ryan said, his voice barely above a whisper. He turned to face Ethan, his eyes raw with emotion. I tried to be what everyone wanted: son, brother, fiancé. But every time I saw you, it was like the truth was screaming at me. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Ethan's heart pounded, a mix of exhilaration and dread. He'd spent years convincing himself Ryan was a fantasy, a memory to tuck away during lonely nights in the barracks. Now, standing here, the fantasy was real, and it terrified him. Do you know what this means? Ethan asked, his voice low. For you. For me. For Lila. This isn't just about us. You're throwing away everything. I know, Ryan said, his voice breaking. But I can't live a lie anymore. And I can't lose you again. The words hung between them, heavy with a decade of unspoken longing. Ethan wanted to reach out, to bridge the gap, but the weight of their reality held him back. He was a soldier, trained to assess risks, to calculate outcomes. This love, truth, exposure was a battlefield he didn't know how to navigate. They sat by the river for hours, talking, unraveling years of silence. Ryan confessed how he'd questioned his feelings in high school, how he'd dated women to prove he was normal, how Lila's kindness had almost convinced him he could be happy. Ethan shared his own struggles hiding who he was in the army. dodging questions about girlfriends, lying awake in war zones wondering if he'd ever feel whole. By noon, the sun was high, and their words had softened into a tentative hope. "What now?" Ethan asked, his voice steadier than he felt. "I need to make things right with Lila," Ryan said. "I owe her that. And then, I want to figure this out. With you." Ethan nodded, his chest tight with a mix of fear and possibility. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. "But this is going to be messy." Ryan smiled. "A small, broken thing. Messy's okay. As long as it's honest." That afternoon, Ethan drove to Lila's family home, a white clapboard house on the edge of town. He needed to see her, to apologize, to understand the damage. She was in the backyard, sitting on a porch swing, her wedding dress replaced by a simple sundress. Her eyes were red, but she offered a tired smile when she saw him. "I'm so sorry, Lila," Ethan started, his voice thick. "I didn't know he felt that way. I swear." She nodded, twisting a tissue in her hands. "I believe you, Ryan. He's always been different when you're around. I just didn't want to see it." Ethan sat beside her, the swing creaking under their weight. "You don't deserve this," he said. "You're too good for this." Lila laughed, a bitter sound. "I wanted to be enough for him. But I think he's been fighting himself for a long time." They talked for an hour, not just about Ryan, but about love, loss, and the courage it takes to let go. Lila wasn't angry, not really, just heartbroken, and that hurt Ethan more than any insult from the night before. As he left, she grabbed his hand. "Take care of him. Okay? He's going to need you." Ethan nodded, his throat too tight to speak. Driving back to the motel, he felt the weight of her words. This wasn't just about him and Ryan. It was about rebuilding, about honesty, about finding a way forward through the wreckage. Back at Fort Benning, Ethan threw himself into work, hoping routine would anchor him. Drills, paperwork, training sessions. The Army was a machine, and he knew how to be a cog. But every quiet moment brought Ryan's face to mind, his voice echoing, "I've loved him since we were kids." He hadn't seen Ryan since their talk by the river, though they texted daily, cautious messages that danced around the bigger questions. Ethan wanted to believe in the possibility of them, but doubt gnawed at him. Could Ryan really walk away from his life? Could Ethan, a soldier bound by duty, build something real in a world that still judged? A week after the wedding, Ethan's phone rang late at night. Ryan's name lit up the screen, and Ethan's heart leapt. "Hey," he answered, trying to sound casual. "I told my parents," Ryan said, his voice heavy. "About me. About us." Ethan sat up, gripping the phone. "How'd that go?" A long pause. "Not great. Dad yelled. Mom cried. They think I'm throwing my life away." Ethan's chest ached. He knew that pain, had lived it when he came out to his own family at 20. His father, a retired colonel, had called it a phase. His mother had prayed for him. They'd come around, mostly, but the scars remained. "I'm sorry," Ethan said. "What do you need?" "You," Ryan said, so softly Ethan almost missed it. "Can I see you? This weekend?" Ethan hesitated. He was due for a training exercise, but he could rearrange things. "Yeah," he said. "Come to Benning. I'll show you my world." Ryan arrived on Saturday, his pickup truck dusty from the drive. Ethan met him at the base gate, his heart pounding as Ryan stepped out, wearing a flannel shirt and a nervous smile. They hugged, brief but tight, and Ethan felt the world shift under his feet. They spent the day together, Ethan showing Ryan the barracks, the training fields, the mess hall. Soldiers nodded at Ethan, some curious about the civilian trailing him. But no one asked questions. Ethan was careful, keeping his distance. But every glance from Ryan felt like a spark. That night, they drove to a dive bar off base, a place where soldiers and locals mixed. Over beers, Ryan opened up about the fallout. Lila's keeping the ring, he said, a wry smile tugging at his lips. She says it's the least I owe her. Ethan winced. She's not wrong. Ryan nodded, staring into his bottle. I hate that I hurt her, but I don't regret it. Not if it means I get to be here, with you. Ethan's breath caught. He wanted to reach across the table, to take Ryan's hand. But the bar was too public, the risks too real. Instead, he leaned closer, lowering his voice. You sure about this? About me? Ryan's eyes met his, steady and sure. I've never been more sure of anything. They left the bar and drove to a quiet overlook, the city lights sparkling below. In the darkness of Ethan's truck, they finally let go hands finding each other, lips meeting in a kiss that felt like a promise. It was tentative at first, then desperate, years of longing pouring out in a single moment. When they pulled apart, Ethan's heart was racing. We're really doing this, he said, half question, half statement. Ryan grinned, his hand still on Ethan's cheek. Yeah, we are. But reality wasn't as simple as a kiss. Back at the base, Ethan faced whispers. A few soldiers had seen him with Ryan, and while no one said anything outright, the looks were enough. The army had changed, but not entirely. Being out was a risk, one Ethan had avoided for years. Ryan, too, was navigating a new world. He'd taken a leave from the fire department, citing personal reasons. But the truth was spreading. Friends stopped calling. His parents barely spoke to him. The small town that had cheered him as a hero now whispered behind his back. One night, Ryan called Ethan, his voice tight. Someone spray-painted fag on my truck. Ethan's blood ran cold. Where are you? I'm coming. No, Ryan said quickly. I'm okay. Just angry. I didn't think it'd be like this. Ethan gripped the phone, wishing he could be there. You don't have to do this alone. I'm here. I know, Ryan said, his voice softening. That's what keeps me going. They made a plan to meet again, this time in Atlanta, a bigger city where they could blend in. Ethan booked a hotel, his heart racing at the thought of a weekend together, away from prying eyes. But as he packed, a knock came at his door. It was his commanding officer, Colonel Hayes, a stern man with graying hair. Caldwell, he said, his tone clipped. We need to talk about your personal life. Ethan's stomach dropped. The whispers had reached the top. Colonel Hayes stood in Ethan's doorway, his face unreadable. There's talk, he said, stepping inside without invitation. About you and some civilian. People are noticing. Ethan's heart pounded, but he kept his voice steady. Sir, my personal life hasn't affected my duties. Hayes raised an eyebrow. It's not about your duties, Captain. It's about perception. You know how this works. Ethan did know. The army was a brotherhood, but it was also a machine of tradition, slow to change. He'd seen soldiers disciplined for less rumors could ruin careers. I'm not hiding who I am, Ethan said, meeting Hayes' gaze. But I'm not advertising it either. Hayes studied him, then nodded. Keep it that way. And watch your back. The warning lingered as Ethan drove to Atlanta that weekend. Ryan was waiting at the hotel, his smile a balm for Ethan's nerves. They spent 2 days exploring the city coffee shops, museums, quiet walks in Piedmont Park. For the first time, they held hands in public. Tentative but thrilling. At night, in the privacy of their room, they let the world fall away. Ryan's touch was careful but sure, and Ethan felt something he hadn't in years, safe. They talked until dawn. About dreams, fears, the future. Ryan wanted to move. Maybe to a city where they could start fresh. Ethan wasn't sure he could leave the army. It was his life, his identity, but for Ryan, he was willing to try. On Sunday, as they checked out, Ryan got a call. His face paled as he listened. "It's my dad," he said after hanging up. "He had a heart attack. I need to go home." Ethan drove him back to the small town, the mood heavy. At the hospital, Ryan's mother greeted them coldly, her eyes flicking to Ethan with suspicion. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice low. "He's family," Ryan said firmly, taking Ethan's hand. It was the first time Ryan had claimed him so openly. And despite the tension, Ethan felt a surge of pride. Ryan's father was stable but weak. Sitting by his bedside, Ryan talked about his life, his choices, his love for Ethan. His father listened, silent, his face a mask. When he finally spoke, it was a single sentence: "I just want you to be happy." It wasn't acceptance. Not fully. But it was a start. Ethan squeezed Ryan's hand. And for a moment, the hospital room felt like a sanctuary. Back at Fort Benning, Ethan faced a new challenge. A junior officer, Lieutenant Brady, had started spreading rumors, questioning Ethan's fitness to lead. "A soldier's gotta trust his captain," Brady said in the mess hall, loud enough for Ethan to hear. "How can we? With him living like that?" Ethan confronted him later. In private. "You got a problem with me. Say it to my face." Brady smirked. "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. You're a distraction." Ethan's fists clenched, but he kept his cool. "I've led men through worse than your gossip. Judge me by my actions, not my life." Brady backed off. But the damage was done. The unit was divided. Some standing by Ethan, others siding with Brady. Ethan knew he'd have to prove himself, not just as a soldier, but as a leader who could rise above prejudice. He threw himself into training, pushing his platoon harder, earning their respect through sweat and results. But at night, alone, he wondered if it was enough. Ryan was fighting his own battles, rebuilding ties with his family, facing the town's judgment. They were in this together. But the weight was crushing. One evening, Ryan called with good news. "I got a job offer," he said, excitement in his voice. "Fire department in Atlanta. Better pay. Better people. I want you to come with me." Ethan's heart leapt, but doubt crept in. "Leave the army." "Ryan, it's all I know." "I'm not asking you to quit," Ryan said. "Just think about it. A fresh start. For both of us." Ethan didn't have an answer. Not yet. But as they talked, he felt the pull of a future he'd never dared imagine, one where he could be himself. With Ryan. Without fear. Ethan stood in the training field, sweat dripping down his brow, as his platoon ran drills under the Georgia sun. He'd pushed them hard, harder than usual, to silence the whispers. But Lieutenant Brady's words still echoed, a challenge to his leadership. Ethan knew he couldn't outrun prejudice, but he could outwork it. After the session, one of his sergeants, Martinez, approached. "Sir, some of the guys are talking about you and that firefighter." Ethan braced himself. "And?" Martinez shrugged. "Most of us don't care. You're a good officer. But Brady's stirring things up. Watch your six." Ethan nodded, grateful for the heads up. He'd earned Martinez's respect in Afghanistan, pulling him out of a firefight. Loyalty like that was rare, and it gave Ethan hope. That night, he video called Ryan, who was packing for his move to Atlanta. "It's a fresh start," Ryan said, holding up a box labeled kitchen stuff. "No one knows me there. No one cares." Ethan envied that freedom. "Things are tense here," he admitted. "Some of the guys are questioning me." Ryan's face softened. "You don't have to stay, Ethan. Come with me. We'll figure it out." The idea was tempting, but Ethan's identity was tied to the Army. Leaving felt like abandoning a part of himself. "I need time," he said. Ryan nodded, but his eyes held a flicker of worry. "Just don't wait too long." Over the next few weeks, Ethan doubled down at work, leading by example, earning back the trust of his men. But Brady's influence lingered, and Ethan felt the strain. He started getting anonymous notes in his locker slurs. Threats. Nothing traceable, but enough to keep him on edge. He didn't tell Ryan, not wanting to worry him. But one night, after finding a note that read "Leave or else," Ethan broke. He drove to Atlanta, needing Ryan's steadiness. Ryan's new apartment was small but warm, filled with half-unpacked boxes and the smell of coffee. When Ethan walked in, Ryan took one look at his face and pulled him into a hug. "What happened?" Ethan showed him the note, his hands shaking. Ryan's jaw tightened. "You're not going back there. Not until this stops." "I can't just run," Ethan said, pulling away. "This is my career, Ryan. My life." "And what about us?" Ryan asked, his voice rising. "What about you being safe? I can't lose you to some coward's threats." They argued, the first real fight they'd had. Ethan felt torn, loyalty to the Army versus the life he could have with Ryan. In the end, they made up, falling into bed, their anger dissolving into touch. But the question lingered, could Ethan keep fighting on two fronts? The next morning, Ethan woke to an email from Colonel Hayes. "Report to my office. Monday. 0800. No explanation. Just the order." Ethan's gut churned. He kissed Ryan goodbye and drove back to Benning, the note burning a hole in his pocket. Hayes was waiting, his desk cluttered with papers. "We've got a problem," he said. "I've had complaints about you. Formal ones." Ethan's heart sank. "Brady?" Hayes nodded. "He's claiming you're unfit to lead. Says your lifestyle is a distraction." Ethan's fists clenched. "Sir, I've done nothing but my job. My record speaks for itself." "I know," Hayes said, leaning back. "But perception matters. I'm giving you a chance to handle this. Prove him wrong, or I'll have to act." Ethan left the office, fury and fear warring in his chest. He knew what he had to do confront Brady. End this now. But as he walked across the base, he saw Martinez waving him over. "Sir, we found something," Martinez said, holding up a crumpled piece of paper. It was another note, identical to the one in Ethan's locker, found in Brady's bunk. Evidence. Ethan felt a surge of hope. He took the note to Hayes, who promised an investigation. But the victory was bittersweet. Brady's actions had exposed a truth Ethan couldn't ignore. The Army wasn't safe. Not fully. Not for him. That night, he called Ryan. "I'm thinking about it," he said. "Leaving. For us." Ryan's voice was soft, hopeful. "I'll be here, Ethan. Whatever you decide." The investigation into Brady moved fast. By week's end, he was disciplined, demoted, and reassigned. The note stopped, and Ethan's platoon rallied around him, their loyalty stronger than before. But the victory felt hollow. The army had protected him, but it hadn't changed. Not really. Ethan started researching option jobs in Atlanta, civilian roles where his skills could transfer. The idea of leaving the army was terrifying, but Ryan's voice on the phone each night, steady and warm, made it feel possible. One weekend, Ethan drove to Atlanta again, this time with a plan. He and Ryan sat in a diner, sharing fries and dreams. "I found a security firm," Ethan said. "They're looking for someone with my experience. Good pay. No barracks." Ryan's eyes lit up. "You're serious?" Ethan nodded, his heart racing. "I want this. With you." Ryan reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "Then let's do it. Together." They spent the weekend apartment hunting, imagining a life where they could be open, free. Ethan felt lighter than he had in years. But a part of him mourned the army, the brotherhood he'd leave behind. Back at base, Ethan submitted his resignation. Colonel Hayes tried to talk him out of it, citing his potential, his record. "You're one of the best, Caldwell," he said. "You sure about this?" "I'm sure," Ethan said, his voice steady. "I've fought enough battles. It's time for something else." His last day was quiet. Martinez and a few others threw him a small send-off. Beers and stories in the mess hall. "You're a good man, sir," Martinez said, clapping his shoulder. "Don't let anyone tell you different." Ethan drove to Atlanta that night, his belongings in the back of his truck. Ryan was waiting, and when Ethan walked through the door, they didn't speak, just held each other, the weight of their choices settling like dust. They moved into a small apartment, a fixer-upper with creaky floors and a view of the city. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. Ethan started his new job, training security teams, while Ryan settled into the fire department. They built a routine: mornings with coffee, evenings with takeout, nights tangled together, learning each other in ways they'd never dared before. But the past wasn't done with them. One day, Lila called. She was in Atlanta, visiting friends, and wanted to see them. Ethan's stomach twisted, but Ryan insisted. "She deserves closure," he said. They met at a quiet cafe. Lila looked good, her smile genuine but tinged with sadness. "I'm happy for you," she said, looking between them. "Really? It's just hard." Ethan reached for her hand. "I'm sorry, Lila, for everything." She squeezed his hand back. "Don't be. You too. You're real. I see it now." As she left, Ethan felt a weight lift. Lila was healing, and so were they. But challenges remained. Ethan struggled to adjust to civilian life, missing the structure of the army. Ryan faced whispers at the fire station, though his crew was mostly supportive. They leaned on each other, their love an anchor through the storms. One night, lying in bed, Ryan turned to Ethan. "You ever regret it? Leaving?" Ethan thought for a moment, then shook his head. "Not if it means I get you." Ryan smiled, pulling him close. "Good. Because I'm not letting you go." Months passed, and Ethan and Ryan settled into their new life. Atlanta was kinder than their small town, but not perfect. They learned to navigate stairs, to hold hands despite them, to build a world where they could be themselves. Ethan's job was demanding but rewarding. He trained security teams for corporate clients, using skills honed in the army. Ryan thrived at the fire station, earning respect for his courage and quick thinking. They made friends, a mix of co-workers and locals who didn't care who they loved. But the past lingered. Ethan's parents called occasionally. Their conversation strained but improving. Ryan's mother sent a card for his birthday, a small gesture that meant everything. His father was slower to come around, but Ryan held out hope. One evening, they attended a fundraiser for a local LGBT center. Ethan, usually reserved, spoke at the event, sharing his story of the wedding, the army, the choice to live authentically. The room listened, rapt, and Ryan's proud gaze from the crowd made Ethan's heart swell. After, a young man approached, barely 20, his voice shaky. "I'm in ROTC," he said. "I'm gay, and I don't know how to do this." Ethan listened, offering advice, his own journey a guide. "Be honest with yourself," he said. "Find people who see you, not just your uniform." The encounter stayed with Ethan, a reminder of why he'd left the army not just for Ryan, but for a life where he could help others like him. Challenges came, as they always do. Ryan's fire station faced budget cuts, and Ethan's firm lost a major client. Money was tight, and stress crept in. One night, they argued over bills, voices raised, until Ryan stormed out. Ethan sat alone, fear clawing at him. What if this was too hard? What if love wasn't enough? Ryan returned an hour later, his face soft with regret. "I'm sorry," he said, pulling Ethan close. "I'm not going anywhere." They talked, really talked, about their fears, their dreams. They made a plan: cut expenses, take on extra shifts, keep building. Together. One weekend, they drove back to the Chattahoochee River, their old haunt. The air was crisp, the water sparkling. Ryan pulled out a small box, his hands trembling. "Ethan," he said, opening it to reveal a simple silver ring. "I don't know what the future holds, but I know I want it with you. Will you marry me?" Ethan's breath caught, tears blurring his vision. "Yes," he whispered, pulling Ryan into a kiss. They laughed, cried, held each other under the willow tree where it all began. The ring felt heavy on Ethan's finger, not with weight, but with promise. Planning a wedding wasn't easy, but Ethan and Ryan tackled it with the same determination they'd brought to their new life. They chose a small venue in Atlanta, a garden not unlike the one where their story began. No peach orchard this time, but roses and fairy lights, a nod to the past with a hope for the future. They invited close friends, a few supportive family members, and, to Ethan's surprise, his parents. His father, now softer with age, hugged him tightly. "I'm proud of you, son," he said, and Ethan nearly broke. Ryan's parents came too, their presence tentative but meaningful. His father shook Ethan's hand, his grip firm, a silent acknowledgement. His mother cried during the vows, not out of sadness, but love. Lila was there, radiant in a blue dress, her smile genuine. She'd found her own path, a new job, a new city. "You two are good together," she whispered to Ethan, squeezing his arm. The ceremony was simple but profound. Ethan wore a tailored suit, Ryan a tuxedo, and as they stood before their loved ones, they spoke vows that carried the weight of their journey. "I was afraid," Ethan said, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "Afraid to love you, to lose you, to be myself. But you showed me what courage really means." Ryan's eyes shone. "You're my home, Ethan. Always have been, always will be." They exchanged rings, and when they kissed, the crowd erupted, not with whispers, but cheers. The reception was a blur of laughter, dancing, and toasts. Martinez, now a friend, raised a glass, joking about Ethan's drill sergeant days. Ryan's fire crew told stories of his heroics. making Ethan prouder than ever. As the night wound down, Ethan and Ryan slipped away to a quiet corner of the garden. They sat, hands entwined, watching the stars. "We made it," Ryan said, his voice soft. Ethan nodded, his heart full. "Yeah, we did." They'd faced humiliation, fear, and loss. But they'd also found love, truth, and a future. The road hadn't been easy, but it led them here to a life where they could stand tall. Together, unashamed. Years later, Ethan would tell their story at another fundraiser, this time with Ryan by his side. He'd speak of the wedding that changed everything, of a groom's salute and a secret that set them free. He'd talk about love as a battle worth fighting, about courage in the face of fear, about building a life that's honest, even when it hurts. And as he spoke, Ryan would squeeze his hand, a reminder that they'd won not just for themselves, but for everyone who'd ever felt they had to hide.